So obviously, organizational structures are almost as unique as fingerprints. Each organization is going to look a little bit different. And there's some broad concepts that we will find in most organizations, but there'll always be differences and small tweaks upon those organizational designs. So again, that means that we need to think of models of ways to kind of conceptualize what kind of organization are we looking at. And one of these is looking at how many departments or departmentalizations are occurring within the organization. So this is the process of breaking up an organization into coherent units within the organizational structure. And we're going to talk about three broad types that don't cover everything we find in organizational structures, but cover a fair amount of organizations. The first one is the functional organization, the second one is the product organization, and the third one is the matrix organization. And again, we will sometimes find hybrids of any of these two or three types in organizations, but it's one of the things we can look at as we're looking at the organizational chart and we're kind of trying to diagnose at a higher level how the organization fits together and also how a problem that we may be trying to address as an organizational psychologist may impact the rest of the organization. We also want to ask this question of how is the organization departmentalized? Is it a functional organization, a product organization, or a matrix organization? So let's discuss these three types. The first is the functional organization. The type of departmentalization is based on the activities or functions performed, i.e. sales or finance. So example, at a very broad level, we might have a chief executive officer that has a president reporting into them. The president themselves is overseeing the functional departments, the production department, the sales department, the research and development department, and the accounting department. We'll generally find this in two types of organizations. We may find them in smaller organizations. So functional organizations are often more common when an organization has gotten large enough that it needs some additional structure, but is still small enough that it may only be doing one type of activity. In other words, the company makes one thing. Therefore, a production department that produces it, a sales department that sells it, a research and development department that kind of determines is there new things that we could incorporate into this department, and an accounting department to keep track, or maybe an HR department to keep track of the money, payrolls, and human resources. That would be an example of a functional organization. Now, sometimes we will find a functional organization in much larger organizations. And what that means is that production is being managed despite whatever is being produced. So kind of think of a multinational organization that has a lot of different productions. They make military hardware, they make automobiles, they make kitchen refrigerators. But all of those are going to be overseen by a senior vice president of production. So it's going to still be all production is being handled in one area. And then the sales department, there may be people that do sales on the various different products. There might be different salespeople for military hardware versus appliances, but they're still all in the same sales department. They're siloed, if you will, from production. This varies from the next type of organizational structure, and that's the product organization. This type of departmentalization is based on the products or product lines produced. Locomotives, refrigerators, auto parts, etc. Each unit has the means necessary to develop, manufacture, and sell its own products. There may be some centralization, and that's why I talked about that hybrid approach. So, example, legal and HR may be their own unit across, but we may also find that each unit has its own legal and HR staff that are specialized. So, for example, if a company is making appliances and military hardware, each function or product might have its own legal team, because there's different requirements and different legal ramifications of those two different products. So this organization would look more like the following. We still have that chief executive officer and president, but now we actually have basically senior vice presidents that are in charge of an entire product line, an entire subset of what the company does. So for example, product one might be military, product two might be automotive, product three might be appliances. And within each of those product lines, we're going to find production, sales, research, development, accounting, HR. Now, again, HR and legal might be above at the president, between the president and the product groups, or off to the side as advisors, but they may also be within the organization itself. In other words, each product line may have its own HR and legal. So this is an example of an organization. We're not going to find, by the way, this usually in smaller organizations. This is usually an organization that's gotten large enough that they're creating very different types of products. We can think of a lot of tech companies that might have social media platforms, which would be product group 1. They may create cell phones and various mobile devices, which might be project group 2. And they might create actual home computing devices or even business computing devices. That might be product group 3. And again, if the organization was designed around this goal, people that worked on, for example, social media, there would be people that do the social media production. They sell the social media. They come up with new ways to basically engage their customers, so research and development, and might even have their own accounting, legal, and HR departments, which would be completely separate from the people that work on the business computers or home computing part of that business. Now, if this was a more traditional organization, a functional organization, then we would have a sales department that does all of that. We'd have a production department that does all of that. So hopefully you can kind of see these two structures. Both of them, like everything we've discussed in this class, have advantages and disadvantages. Some of them are a very good fit for an organization, some of them are not. It really does depend, but the larger the organization gets, the more and more likely we'll start to see this product organizational layout. It becomes more and more difficult for individual production, for example, to be one silo unto itself when it's dealing with a lot of different types of products. And finally, we can see the matrix organization. The matrix organization usually occurs kind of at that mid-level. So if we were really kind of just trying to break these down by size of the company, we'd expect to see a functional organizational structure in smaller organizations, though not exclusively. We'd expect to see a product orientation in much larger organizations, but not exclusively. And we tend to see matrix organizations in kind of intermediate or medium-sized organizations. This is the type of departmentalization in which a product or project form is superimposed on top of the functional. So it's a true hybrid, both production and functional. The issue here right off the bat is that it does allow a smaller company to function like a larger company. There's better interconnections, there's a lot of better teamwork, and it's a structure that lends itself to a lot of cooperation. The downside is that almost everyone is going to have two bosses, a production boss and a functional boss with dual authority. Sometimes we find matrix organizations also occur when they're temporary in an uncertain environment. It does tend to increase stress and frustration produced by these two boss managers. So that's the most common issue when we look at a matrix organization. So the next slide will be an actual example of a matrix organization. And so we have a president that is in charge of farm machinery division, but also we have project alpha manager, project beta manager, and project gamma manager. So within the farm machine division, where we have a production, legal, engineering, and accounting department, we also have teams that are working on individual projects. And there's team managers of those projects. So a portion of the production department, legal department, engineering department, and accounting department might be on the first project. So they're both reporting to the heads of those departments, but they're also reporting to the head of the team that is working on this particular project. So again, we have both functional authority and project authority, and depending on the size of the organization, there might be a lot of these different matrices. This is also common when we start looking at flatter organizations and organizations that are more focused on teamwork. So the more you are functioning on functional teams and giving team powers and team members having basically empowerment, the more likely you're going to start to fall into a matrix organization. The biggest thing that you need to make sure when you're falling into this kind of a structure, or you're coming into an organization that you identify as a matrix organization, is what is the levels of communication between those functional authority leaders and those project leaders? Is there communication or is there conflict? In other words, if your boss in the legal department has told you no matter what, you need to do A, B, and C, but the project you're on is telling you, no, you need to do A and B and not C, that's going to cause conflict. And we need to look for that and make sure that that's not occurring for this to be successful. So we didn't spend a lot of time on this, but I just really wanted to kind of briefly touch on the idea that beyond organizational structure, there's also different types of organizational structures based, again, broadly on size, but also on the decision of what matrix makes the most sense, matrix, production, or functional. So as always, if you have questions, let me know in the comments or the discussion session on Canvas. And I will look forward to speaking to you in the very next module, which will also be the last module of this class. So congratulations, we're almost to the end.